And I'm going to tap into the announcement. And hello, everyone. This is the December 2020 Programs and Policy Subcommittee meeting of the Minneapolis PAC. And this meeting, the announcement is that this meeting may involve remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic. Pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Sections 13D.021. And further, this meeting is being recorded, and by joining, you are giving consent for this meeting to be recorded. Is that the extent of that statement?
That sounds pretty good to me. And okay. Just a reminder also, everyone, if you have some earphones or anything like that, please use those, because that cuts down on a lot of the feedback that we might get. I'm going to put mine on right now.
All right, first up on our agenda, in my, thanks for your patience for a second. I want to present the correct people for the who's here on the Upper Harbor Terminal project. Terrific. Yeah, Upper Harbor Terminal people are here. Nathan Coster from Minneapolis Public Works and Hillary Holmes of CPED. And we welcome both of you. And hand it over.
Thanks, Peter. We'll get started, and then if it's all right with everyone, I'll share my screen for the presentation tonight. My name is Nathan Coster, Transportation Planning and Programming. I'm the overall project manager for the Public Works section of the project, and I have a guest here tonight. I'll let Hillary introduce herself.
Good evening, or yeah, I think it's evening at this point. Everybody, I'm Hillary Holmes, and I work for the City of Minneapolis and the Department of Community Planning, Economic Development, CPED, and the Economic Development Division. And I'm working on the Upper Harbor Terminal redevelopment project, and also act as committee staff to the city's advisory committee, the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee.
Thanks, Hillary. I'll do a little introduction for the group tonight, then I'll let Hillary kick it off. So we are missing one person of our Public Works team tonight. I'd be remiss without introducing him. He's out on furlough today, but Alexander Cato, he is the lead planner, and he's also going to be the lead for the community engagement portion of the Public Works project. Now, for everyone who's probably heard of Upper Harbor, it's a very large and complex project. We thought it would be very timely to give an update. Right now, CPED has the draft coordinated plan out for public comment. However, because this project is so complex, we thought we'd give you an update so you're aware of what it is, the timeline, and what to expect. So Public Works and CPED are coming to both the Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Bicycle Advisory Committee here tonight, and then next week with BAC. I would like to remind everyone this is an informational item with this cycle, but we are going to be starting our traditional layout review process in the January through roughly April timeframe, where you'll see more traditional layouts and designs with the project. Tonight's just to really reframe everyone on such a big, important project for the city. So with that being said, I'll start sharing a presentation. Hillary will go over more of the broad Upper Harbor and draft coordinated plan, and then she'll transition to me, and I'll highlight more of the public infrastructure and what you'll be looking forward to in the coming months from Public Works.
Okay, Nathan's getting that queued up. Thanks, Nathan. For a refresher, I'm not sure if anybody that is currently on the committee or subcommittee has followed this project or been around long enough to have seen this project come a couple of years ago when we were doing the draft concept plan for the redevelopment. If that was the case, then you may have had more interaction with had more interaction with my predecessor on the project, Ann Calvert, a longtime City of Minneapolis employee. Ann put in a lot of years on the project and is still with the city, but I had started working with Anne on this a couple of years ago. So that's just a little more background, and when you may have last heard, we can touch on that a little bit. If you'd like to advance through, and don't mind me telling you to do so. So again, for some orientation for the site, where it's located, a little more context for it, in case you're not familiar with it. It is 48 acres, multiple parcels owned by the city of Minneapolis, formerly operating as a barge shipping terminal on the Mississippi River in the McKinley neighborhood in North. As you may be familiar, the operations that had barge traffic, those operations on site ceased when the lock closed, and there is still some active uses on site, including outdoor storage and some tenants that operate businesses that use that. So it is still an active site, and you'll see kind of the span north-south. It's about a mile of riverfront along the Mississippi River, and some of the parcels you'll see also extend to just at the freeway, I-94. And so you can see kind of where Dowling Avenue accesses the site, and then also the southern boundary being 33rd Avenue North. You can advance, please. If you don't mind advancing one more, I think the next slide makes a little more sense to lead with. So I had mentioned the concept plan for redevelopment of the Upper Harbor Terminal site, and what that work can entail. We'll touch on that briefly, but just to give you an overview of the past 5 years, again, since people may be either new to understanding about this project or hearing about it, or maybe had interacted with it previously. So this is, again, just a review of where we've been over the last 5 years at this point. Different phases of engagement, responding to different phases of redevelopment planning. The concept plan and the coordinated plan we can talk a little more about, and I'll keep it pretty high level, but just so you understand the different kind of phases of activity that have been occurring over the last 5 years since the lock closed and request for qualifications for master developer went out, and working alongside the park board and with the selected master developer United Properties of the site since 2017. And at this point, we arrived at the coordinated plan, the draft coordinated plan, which is out for public comment right now, as Nathan had mentioned. And this is the result of work with the city's advisory committee. I'd mentioned that I staff the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee, who are really helping refine and create the work over the past year and a half of the concept plan into the coordinated plan. And if you can flip back to the previous slide, Nathan, just a little more about who is involved at this point. So the city had created the advisory committee when they approved the concept plan in March of 2019. And soon after that, in the summer, MPRB created their own advisory committee for the park planning that have been meeting, and a concurrent external to the city community engagement event called the Learning Tables. And I say, I emphasize the external to the city. They've been great partners. However, this is an engagement event led by the groups listed here. So Pillsbury United Communities convening with the Public Policy Project and Environmental Justice Coordinating Council through a grant from the McKnight Foundation to convene these monthly events around the same topics, same development topics for Upper Harbor. And so these three different groups have been working together, yet separate, but just so you kind of understand maybe a little more of the landscape over the last year and a half, and who's putting in a lot of volunteer hours, the CAC and the CPC, respectively. So if we can maybe jump ahead to the slide 5, I think it would be. I won't go through this. Hopefully, I think this was linked to in your agenda, so it's part of the meeting materials. But this is to help people understand what we've been hearing over the last, not just year and a half, but in particular the last year and a half around these 6 project values, and how the redevelopment plan and what's being proposed achieves these values. And so there's a lot more about that in the plan. And so I don't want to spend time on the tiny print. So advance, please. And so again, I mentioned the concept plan and the draft coordinated plan, and we can gloss, we tend to gloss over this sometimes, but really want to make sure people understand What does it mean to have a concept plan? What does it mean to have a draft coordinated plan in particular, particularly since these aren't two typical planning documents that exist? I've heard that people refer to or describe the draft coordinated plan almost more like a small area plan for the site because it is so large. It is a multi-phase redevelopment, and it is just just a different level of planning. And so these are two milestones that were part of the exclusive negotiating rights development with the master developer to make sure that we have these places to check in throughout the redevelopment planning process. And so we're now at this second important milestone, the draft coordinated plan, and it explains a little more about what's in the plan. And if you can advance, please. These are some renderings that have been released, emphasis on renderings, illustrative renderings, but again, to help people imagine, in particular because, oh, I'm sorry, having Wi-Fi troubles. It wouldn't be a normal day if that wasn't the case. So renderings, again, to help people imagine, since it is an active industrial site at this time, or with truck traffic. And I say industrial meaning, I mean the outdoor storage. It is a site that has not been redeveloped, and so there is just another possibility to re-envision and help people get excited about and see a different future for this site. And so these are illustrative renderings that were produced for the draft coordinated plan and have been used in case you'll see any number of communications about the project. You may recognize them. The next, please. I'm assuming there are some things in those renderings of interest to this group as far as what it's portraying. So the redevelopment plan, the draft coordinated plan, really, it's such an important and significant time to connect North Minneapolis to the Mississippi River, to make these connections that have been either non-existent or or also completely lacking over the number of decades. The proposal is to retain public ownership of the majority of the private development parcels. That is something that's new from the concept plan and may not be as widely known. And so again, that's why we're focusing on what's proposed as part of the development, and then we'll get into a quick overview next. And then also, along with making that connection to the riverfront, we have a new riverfront park and then trails along the riverfront. Again, I mentioned that mile of riverfront. Some of the real estate development of the Community Performing Arts Center. You may have also heard to it referred as the outdoor music performance venue. That's how the concept plan referred to it. And then the health and wellness hub. And then also a mix of housing, affordable housing, mixed use developments that include affordable housing. Has been very important that housing is not just affordable by definition as terms of financing, but that it's attainable to current North Minneapolis residents. Opportunities for commercial space and for local businesses to be in those spaces. Opportunity for community ownership. Here it's referred to as a community-based entity to own or manage commercial real estate. Community ownership has been a very important topic throughout engagement and through the advisory committees. So just to, again, understand if when you're seeing the phrase community entity, that's really focused on ensuring community ownership or creating spaces for ownership. And if that means, again, physical ownership of real estate or making sure that people are welcome and feel that they have ownership of the space. So that is, again, a wide range there. Sustainable revenue streams proposed to go back into the north side. Since the land is proposed to remain in public ownership, the possibility of diverting those or dedicating those annual ground lease payments to a separate fund within the city to go back into the north side and focus on efforts and initiatives around anti-displacement and anti-gentrification. And then also, along with the Community Performing Arts Center ticket fee that's been proposed by First Avenue, who is a development partner on the team, that it would be a ticket fee on First Avenue ticketed events, and then that annual fund would also be dedicated and directed by community to go towards priorities, efforts that are important to the community there. And then also not just construction jobs, but bringing living wage permanent jobs to the site as well, and a range of career ladders and opportunities. Next, please. This is, I believe, page 11 in the draft coordinated plan. I think it's in there twice, but again, this is the overview of both phases. It's currently phase 1 and phase 2 of development. Phase 1 is really focused on Dowling Avenue, reinforcing Dowling Avenue, reinforcing the park that would go in, as you'll see, right at the river in Dowling. And so there are 2 mixed-use affordable housing developments that are proposed as part of phase 1 on Dowling. Thank you, Nathan. And then also the park. So part of the park improvements will be part of phase 1. The Community Performing Arts Center is advancing as part of phase 1. And then infrastructure. So there's phase 1 infrastructure as well around both Dowling, and I won't veer too much into this. Nathan can speak to it much better than I can and will be doing so. So to give you some sense, and then on the what is the southern end of the site at 33rd, thank you, Nathan, is a jobs building. And so that is for production and processing, as you may be familiar with the 2040 plan, referring to those uses as production and processing. And some numbers there. I think I tend to start talking and get pretty deep into this, so I don't know if I've gone over time, I apologize, but we can skip ahead to kind of, again, what's planned for the next couple months as we're in the public comment period. The CPC released the draft coordinated plan. We released the draft coordinated plan for public comment at the beginning of December. There is an online survey for people to provide their feedback on the draft plan. The project website has been updated with a page dedicated to the draft plan, a new homepage, and some updated information about engagement. The events calendar is a great place to see where we are, because there are a number of meetings that we've been at in December and will be at in January, as long with a city open house, city hosted online open house. And I should note, of course, we are very much online still and not planning or attending in-person events. And so we've taken a number of ways to make sure that the word is getting out about this, to get information out there. And I think you can see a little bit more about that on the next slide. Can you skip? Thanks. So yes, so again, I won't read through this in detail. Hopefully you have heard about this before tonight, but in case you haven't, there's a number of ways, and I would really encourage people to go to the project website, which is upperharbormpls.com. We share that website with the park board for this project in particular, I mean. And then also Public Works will be using that as their homepage as well for the phase 1 public realm and infrastructure. We had an open house on December 15th, and that recording is now on the project website. There's a second city online open house on January 5th, and then a couple of other events in January, one in particular hosted by the McKinley community. And so that's an online conversation on Sunday, January 10th. And there is an additional partner event, online event in the works for the beginning of January. And then various updates at North and Northeast neighborhood organizations. I believe we'll be at AFCAC tomorrow evening, if you're familiar with the Above the Falls Community Advisory Committee. And then, yeah, we'll be around. I just check out the events calendar. I'm very happy to answer questions, and thank you for time on your agenda and for letting me provide an update. It's good to see everybody.
Thank you, Hillary. We're open for questions and discussion. Is there any other component of this presentation? And as far as any slides, or is Nathan on the slide, or is this somebody ready to go to discussion?
Yeah, I have a presentation to follow up, so it ties into so people here can see what more of the infrastructure plan is that Hillary had alluded to.
Shall we proceed with that and then go to the discussion afterwards? Let's go. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Peter, and thanks, Hillary. So we want to give an overview, Public Works, as far as like what the planning phase is looking like for infrastructure. For those of you looking for layouts and concepts, that's not where we're here or what we have to share tonight. We're still very much at the high level, more of the framework of what we're looking at for the site. And the reason why we want to partially come in two phases is to talk about how we're tying in with the coordinated plan and what that work's looking like, and also next steps for how we're going to be presenting layouts to the PAC and the BAC coming up in January. So none of the layouts tonight, more of the framework for what we're looking at and then schedule for engagement. So as far as the public realm and infrastructure, this isn't too much different than what we presented about a year ago. Most of our work right now has been working closely with CPED, the development team, and the community to continue advancing the work at this site. So what we want to highlight today is just a continued effort of showing how we're rolling out both street and utility infrastructure to make this site suitable for not only opening up the riverfront for the north side community more broadly, but also, as Hillary alluded to, the housing, the jobs, the park, and just overall access to a great opportunity for north side residents who don't have access to the river currently. So what we've continued to hear is providing a connected transportation system with complementary public utilities, really prioritizing the pedestrian and bicycle connections, especially connecting people to the riverfront, and offering that riverfront experience with a focus on innovative stormwater solutions. The table, the map you see on the screen just highlights the phases. Primarily, we're focusing on the Dowling connection, and this scope was expanded since we showed this last time, really to highlight the stretch of Dowling that is on the Vision Zero high injury network. So we are extending that connection into the neighborhood to really make sure that we are focusing investing on the streets that are some of the most challenging in the city and making sure that connects all the way into the neighborhood. The other part of street is really focusing on the first phase of the parkway, so the northern half to connect to the primary areas where there's phase one investments, as well as a short stretch of 33rd Avenue to provide another connection to the north side community closer to Lowry Avenue. Some of the utilities that we're focusing on is we're coordinating with Excel Energy to relocate the overhead transmission wires. Right now, they currently go through the middle of all the development parcels. And then lastly, focusing on making sure we have the proper connections for sanitary systems, stormwater systems, as well as the potable water systems. So the next slides I'll be showing is just high-level connections for the streets and utilities. What we're calling Upper Dowling, this is from Lyndale down to the riverfront. Currently, this stretch has backup sidewalk curb, on-street bike lanes, and it's a very challenging stretch for multimodal connections into the neighborhood. And as I had mentioned, this was on the Vision Zero high injury network. Right now, this is just an illustrative concept that we've been working up with a team that's showing ability to get boulevards in, trees, pedestrian scale lighting, and converting on-street bike lanes to what we're tentatively thinking as a multi-use path. This is but one stretch. We do have a stretch a little bit further west that does go down to a 2-lane section where we're able to look at some more innovative stormwater treatments. As we look at Upper Dowling, as we're calling this stretch would come from the neighborhood down across the I-94 corridor and into the site. Right now, we're showing some illustrative concepts where we'd be looking to move bike facilities off street, as I'd mentioned, and also innovative treatments for bridging the gap over the I-94 freeway. Right now, this is a bridge that is owned by MnDOT. However, we have been working really closely with them to see what type of treatments that we can do on the bridge. This is an example of what was done recently at 26th Ave North. This would be on something on the low end. We are working closely with the bridge office to see if we can do something a little bit more robust, whether it's barriers or other more protective type treatments across the bridge as compared to just striping and delineators. But we don't have anything yet to share on MnDOT as far as like what we're able to do on the bridge. They're checking some of the structural loading limits that we can work with. As Hillary had alluded to, here's some more of the illustrative graphics coming into what we're calling Lower Dowling as you cross over Washington as you get closer to the site. In this area, we would be looking at separated sidewalks and bicycle facilities. As we get closer to the riverfront, we would be looking at more of a standard parkway with separate bicycle trails and pedestrian paths. And this is an area where we really like to focus on innovative stormwater, as well as reestablishing healthy trees, as well as pedestrian scale and parkway lighting. One of the other areas that we do want to focus on, we have heard a bit from the community, is right now there's really one accessible entrance for walking and biking. Because of the way that CPED and the Coordinated Planning Committee have wanted to prioritize living wage jobs, one of the development parcels on the southern end of the site near 33rd is for the production and processing development parcels. And one of the things that we'd like to explore is try to find ways to further prioritize and find a way to get walking and biking connections, as well as upgrade the rail crossings to be fully accessible. So this is extremely critical because, as Hillary said, there's 1 mile of riverfront, and to have such big gaps in accessible entrances for walking and biking would be very challenging for the community. So that's one of the things that we've heard early on, and we're working to try to find ways to get that accomplished through this project. At a high level, I'd mentioned that we're trying to develop water and sanitary systems to be developed in phase 1 to accommodate the phase 1 development parcels. At a high level, as I said, potable water, sanitary systems, and stormwater. One of the things that we are trying to focus on is exploring options with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization to implement innovative stormwater solutions to not only reduce the amount of stormwater into the Mississippi, reduce stormwater runoff in the Mississippi River, but also to treat the water and enhance water quality, not only on a district level, but also looking at the 160 acres upstream in the watershed and potentially finding solutions to treat that before it hits the river. Some of the concepts I'm showing, whether it's tree trenches, bioswales, or ecosystems and habitat, are things that have been prioritized not only by Public Works, but by the private development team and the park board as we seek to redevelop 50 acres. As far as what we've heard is continuing to design, build, and support public spaces that prioritize inclusivity and community ownership around Northside residents. And what community ownership means is something that we've taken to heart, and as I'll show later, we're working on the next phases of integrating public art into our preliminary planning. That is something a little bit new for Public Works, but I'll highlight that a little bit later. But clearly, a sense of ownership is very much a key theme that we've heard, and Hillary highlighted the change in plans to have primarily public ownership of land maintained through the coordinated plan. Another major theme is there's been longstanding harm from the construction of I-94, and that's been a consistent theme we've heard from the neighborhood. And just being able to address and overcome that barrier through infrastructure, we're doing as much as we can to prioritize that connectivity over the interstate. As I've said, consistently riverfront-oriented experience with a focus on green infrastructure, and then continuing to find ways to support existing and future transit services, and working with our partners with Metro Transit to not only evaluate what the service needs are now, but into the future. As far as intent and project goals, making sure information is readily available on the Upper Harbor website, strengthening relationship with the key Northside communities between the project stakeholders and the project team, creating desirable infrastructure and public realm elements that reflect the community and create community excitement and sense of ownership, which is a reason why we're focusing on public art so early in this project and trying to integrate it into the infrastructure. And then ensuring public questions and concerns are heard through the overall project process. As far as timeline, our team that we have on board, we've been closely coordinating with CPED as they've been advancing the coordinated plan. But now we're about to launch into our typical layout process, which is why we want to make sure everyone here in the PAC and then next week at the BAC understands what the coordinated plan is, and then why we'll immediately be coming back to show more layouts and designs. As far as like looking ahead, we'll be having 2 community open houses over the course of the next couple months. And then that's following our traditional process to get the layout approval later in 2021. As I've said, we're trying to integrate public art into this project more early on as compared to having more bolt down art. We're trying to integrate art into the infrastructure. And then also working more upfront and early on with the stormwater planning. As far as engagement, clearly we're still in a virtual environment, and we don't have the crystal ball as far as the timeline of when we'll be out of this. So we're continuing to rely on as many relationships in the community to spread the word through many as avenues as we can. We have still some traditional venues as far as mailings, but a lot of it is going to be digital in nature. We'll be using the project website that we've shared in this materials. I've also put in the chat, Upper Harbor MPLS. We'll have all the project information, the engagement timeline. We'll be using interactive and online surveys, so keep an eye out for that. And then as far as the engagement, as I said, open houses, but then we're also setting up key focus group meetings with key stakeholders in the community. So I know that's a ton of information. It is a really big project, and that's why I want everyone to know. Tonight's but one step. We're coming back immediately in the next couple weeks to talk more about layouts from the public works side. But I'll kind of pause there, and Hillary and I can stand by for questions. I know there's a lot, so thanks for hanging in there and listening to us.
Sure thing. Thanks, Nathan. And with that's a great use of our time for 30 minutes. Appreciate those two presentations. And with their short cycle return to PAC next month in mind, what are I'm opening the floor for questions or comments that would be people think are suited to today's presentations.
I'm kind of curious about, you mentioned public art a fair amount, and that gets me thinking about benches and bathrooms. And I'm wondering how integrated, if you've started thinking about those fundamental pieces and how they might work or be part of sort of public art space, the benches in particular.
I had a little bit of an echo during the question, so I apologize. I just asked you to repeat that. I'm sorry, Julia.
Just public art benches, also bathrooms.
We haven't made any determination yet. That's why we're here early on. We haven't started the engagement with the community, so we haven't determined what the public art is yet. So it's definitely open. And what we did forget to mention is Park Board isn't here tonight. They had a conflict, but they are also working as part of the development of the park, and they're on the same website, so they would have potential buildings and restrooms and other facilities. And I can pass that along to Park Board, but I know that's something that they would be looking at, as well as public restrooms as a part of any shelter pavilions that they would have on site. So thanks for calling that out, Julia.
Is there any involvement or interaction with the possible widening of I-94 in that area? I think that's still under discussion about adding the lane there. Is that something that might affect anything or would require coordination?
Thanks, Chris, or Christopher, sorry. Yeah, we have been working really closely with MnDOT. They're clearly a partner. I just want to make sure to call everyone's attention. I know it's been a long time since this played out, but Minneapolis Public Works did make a pretty strong resolution through City Council about our stance on the I-94-252 project, and our stance that we would like to see lanes converted to HOV or transit as compared to any lane expansion. And just so everyone's aware, that project is under a little bit of a reboot and has been reclassified to an EIS, and that'll be re-kicking off sometime in early 2021. So
what's an EIS?
EIS is an environmental impact statement, as compared to before it was an EA, which is an environmental assessment. And it basically defines what the potential impacts of the project are based upon its scope. And one of the key things there is they're now going to be re-updating their project and need statement that's required a part of the federal NEPA process, National Environmental Protection Act. And part of that will now include looking at transit such as highway BRT. And yes, we are very interested and engaged as a part of that transit priority along I-94 and 252.
Would block size be something that you'd be talking to us about in January?
I think block size is probably more towards the draft coordinated plan. Would you agree, Hillary?
Thanks for that question. As far as block size goes, the site will have to go through replatting, so that will be a process that's beginning soon. There will be a number of parcels. The whole 48 acres needs to be replatted, and so the general boundaries, I think you can see as part of the draft coordinated plan, and that is, I would say it's, again, from concept plan to coordinated plan, the concept plan assigning some new general parcel boundaries, and that has been carried through the draft concept plan, but anything more official than that will be happening after the draft coordinated plan.
So in terms of pedestrian preferred maximum block sizes, is that something that if we wanted to weigh in, we'd be premature?
I think I'll just maybe try to touch on that quick, and then if Nathan has a follow-up. So I think another site, I'll say constraint or challenge is that there is an active rail line that runs north-south, and so on this particular aerial, you'll see, and maybe Nathan, if you still have the screen, you can maybe motion to it. Thanks. So Dowling and 33rd both cross the active rail. And so as far as other crossings, they're limited to those two crossings. And then the sidewalk and other trails continuous along the riverfront would be. Yep. Is that helpful?
It's helpful, but I guess I completely understand that there's current constraints that may or may not continue. I'm more concerned about like giant buildings, giant entertainment centers that make it difficult to realize suddenly there's a strong wind coming down the Mississippi and you want to be a little bit protected and buffered by buildings. Being able to have more frequent cut throughs is really lovely for walkability. And our block lengths are pretty long in Minneapolis. So I'm curious at what point, if the PAC wanted to weigh in on that, where the point that would be appropriate.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. I definitely appreciate that comment. And I think also just to note that as far as individual developments, they will each go through the more typical land use approvals process. And so if that's helpful to you as far as when design would be happening. So there will be still yet to be design and land use approvals for each individual development across the site, including the Community Performing Arts Center. There is still a design process yet to be had for that venue.
My understanding is that as the PAC, we only see public works projects, so anything in CPED doesn't come in front of us unless it's really atypical, and I don't know if it would. So I'm more curious about in the platting maybe, or any requirements. I don't know how the sort of easements and keeping right of way clear would work. Like the block sizes in the North Loop are just, it's really frustrating when you're accidentally one block off and you can't cut over for forever. So it's kind of looking to avoid that in new structures going up and where it's appropriate for us to weigh in this kind of development.
I would say in the draft coordinated plan, it is open for public comment now. And then, as I alluded to previously, this is still going through our traditional layout approval process. So we will be coming back for 0% in January and then 30%. And it's probably one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight 33rd as well as Dowling is we are very aware of the block spacing and the gaps here, especially if we only invested in 30 and in Dowling and did not have any walking and biking improvements on 33rd, because we know there's the active rail line, which would require bridges, as well as there's private property abutting the other side of the rail tracks for a majority of the corridor. So we know there's active challenges there.
So, sorry to keep asking, is there, if we wanted to do a resolution about that, would it be appropriate to do now, or would we just wait till either 0% or 30%? Not necessarily for building these roads yet, but for keeping the right of way there, and that potential for them, if the rails go out, that might become easier, whatever it is, like not locking ourselves in with giant buildings with no alleys or little covered walkways.
This is Matthew. Julia, I think 0 or 30% feels appropriate to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Matt.
Are there any other questions or for them? I just have one on the same line. Say about the connections across 94 and 33rd Avenue. Will those be open for discussion in the presentation next month? Being a huge part of whether this project becomes is to the degree it becomes a car only or a two car intensive destination is going to depend so strongly on the quality of the connections. You know, at least coming from the North Minneapolis side, we all know what Dowling looks like. Mm-hmm. It's just like any freeway connection. There's automatically kind of a psychological barrier, and so I'll just leave it at that. And ask you about those.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I don't have anything to speak to, but the principles of narrowing the lane width, shortening the crossings, tightening the radius, elevated table crossings for the trail, prioritizing as much space behind the curb, having buffers and trees, like those are all the things we're pushing as much as we can with MnDOT, the county, and our project partners. And I'll be back in a couple weeks, and I'll be willing and able and excited to hear your feedback. But that has been the theme that we've heard throughout. And there's clearly people up there who might think that it's already congested for vehicles, but we already know this is a high injury network. There's disproportionate outcomes for people walking and biking, and it's a significant barrier that for the last 40 years has resulted in inequitable outcomes for this community. So we're trying our best to bridge that gap and really connect the neighborhood, which is why we extended the scope of the project on Dowling further into the neighborhood, because we know it is such a challenge.
Okay, Nathan. No, thank you again. And thank you, Hillary. Anything else from the attendees, or we'll wrap their part of it?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really looking forward to seeing the layouts.
Mm-hmm.
For real. Thanks, Barb. Yeah, real.
And the stormwater management, if there's anything cool going on with sidewalks, I'm very eager.
So we'll be back in a couple weeks and we'll have more of the layout specific, but in the interim, I wanted to make sure there's a very complicated process of internal city approvals. It's a very unique project. Hillary's looking for feedback on the draft coordinated plan, but just so everyone knows, we're still coming back for the full layout approval. This will still have to go through all of the environmental reviews through the AER, Planning Commission. So there's one of many steps. We still have a lot of work left to go, and wanted to make sure anyone have questions about the schedule and process that they had that time, and they know we will be back.
All right, Nathan, thank you. And thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Happy holidays to you.
Yes, to you too.
All right, that's next up. Somebody have thought something? Otherwise, next up we have the segment of our agenda goes to welcoming, onboarding, mentoring new members, featuring Julia Curran.
Whoa. Do you want me to take it, start with it, Peter, or what's the topic?
Sure, go ahead. I'll bring my notes up too, and I did some from this morning. So.
Okay.
What the hell?
Wow. I've made a short list of a few things to talk about, but I know that Matthew also had some stuff to discuss with us around like the coming up full pack meeting and what we might need to have done by then. Matthew, do you want to talk to us about that, or do you want me to give my list first?
Well, maybe I'll start. Just setting the context for the discussion. First of all, I'm very excited. We have 3 new members joining us. The first meeting in January. So this is an exciting time to get prepared to welcome them, and then just for the whole committee, kind of get back on track with orientation and onboarding ideas, and recenter some different things. So I'm going to share my screen just to start, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, and then hopefully we can take the rest of the time to see what you all are thinking, and flesh out these ideas. I'll take notes kind of live as well, and then we can follow up at subsequent meetings. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and also talk through this verbally as well. So what I did in sort of preparation for this is look back at ways we've done this in the past, and I think there are good lessons from the past on onboarding and welcoming, and then also things that we may be able to improve on and do better. And that's what we want to see what you think tonight. So a couple of basics. The first full meeting in January, we need to go through an election process. And we're going to talk about it at the executive committee tomorrow about how to do that. But I think that's also a good opportunity to talk through the different roles as well of the different officers. And I'll just share that a little bit right now. I have a one pager on that. Again, we're going to go over all this, so I'm not going to go over all of it today. But basically the chair, vice chair, secretary, and then the co-chairs of the subcommittees and what their roles are. So I think that'll be important. And then I looked and found an orientation in the past for new members. And I was thinking we could do some basic introductions. And actually, sorry, not basic, take some time and really spend time getting to know each other a little bit. So for new members, we can have some questions about what they're looking forward to or what they may hope to achieve or why they're interested in the PAC. Returning members, some things about why you enjoy the committee or what's something you're proud of, and then just some icebreaker questions. And all that I'm going over, we can sort of modify and we'll prepare with the assistance of the conversation today and then the executive committee tomorrow. And then the other item is just going over the roles of the subcommittee in full. That's also part of the presentation. Just making sure that people understand what engineering is, what types of projects go there, what P&P is, what types of projects go, how agendas are set, and that type of thing. Let's come back to notes and thoughts. Then I was thinking, in conversations with a few of you, we can have a series of meetings over the first quarter of the year with fun and helpful items at P&P for orientation. So, and I don't know exactly what to call this. I don't have a cool name for it, but meeting norms, processes, ideas, talk about some things like subcommittee expectations versus full committee and like how we create agendas around that. Julia had an idea that I'll let you talk about in a second, but just a list of acronyms and like some of those technical public worksy things, kind of like when Nathan was talking about NEPA and other things. Somebody asked, what is that? So just making sure that we have an understanding of that. And then I have a list of other things that we've done in the past. So a presentation guide. This was your idea. You created this with a little bit of assistance, and so we have a presentation guide for staff that come to the committee for projects.
The one document that lets them know like what is helpful for them to show us, so that we can give the most valuable feedback, and hopefully they can share it beforehand. For those, right. I think we were calling it a one-pager for a while, and then we didn't because it goes out to them instead of to us.
Yep. So it is a one-pager. So different things of what to talk about at 0%, 30%, accessibility, that type of thing. And we can revisit all of this. There's resolution guidance. I think this is something that's really important to revisit as well, and think through how to write effective resolutions. I guess that's all I have on that. And then I sort of have a need to know document that I share every so often. So things like the Minneapolis Complete Streets policy, our transportation action plan. I got to update this ahead of next week. 20-year streets funding plan, how we develop our CIP and share that website, and a variety of things like that. And I think I have a few more other things. We could also revisit the strategic priority work that you all have done over the past couple of years. And our current state of that is, oh, and Chris was out today. I don't think we said that, but he's out today. So we have a spreadsheet of former priority work areas that you all have come up with. And this is something we haven't revisited for a while, and so it'd be good to do that. And then finally, this is my idea that I'm very interested in, is I wanna go through like a little homework exercise. I have a link and just talk through principles of negotiation. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, with just conversations between the PAC and Public Works project managers. It's a fun storyboard type of link, and I'll share this whenever we decide to have this on the agenda. But basically, principles of effective negotiation, and I'd love to talk through with the committee. How are we negotiating between Public Works and the PAC, and like where is this group's power? What does success look like, and different things like that. And I just think that could be a fun conversation. So I'm going to stop there. That's sort of a starting point that I've sort of put together, and would love to hear your thoughts and ideas and what you think of this and other ways we can move forward. And I'll take notes.
I love it, Matthew. But I have to say, I'm seeing only the Upper Harbor stuff so far.
I'm seeing the thing that Matthew pulled up. So.
Oh, okay. Neil, that is interesting. So what do other people? Do other people see the Word document?
Matthew, I'm seeing your stuff as well.
Okay.
I am too, Matthew.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I too know what Neil's talking about.
yeah.
All right. Well, sorry, Neil. I will share this with you.
Yeah, just send it to me. That's fine.
Yeah,
but I'm not seeing any. What's that?
And come back, maybe.
Well, I know how to get back in. I suppose I might.
The same link.
Same link. But, yeah, let me try that. Hold on.
Okay.
So Matthew, you're saying that the first half, for the first full meeting, and then you're saying the rest of the stuff will come during subsequent meetings at PNP, and I like that idea. Hopefully, okay. A lot of them would be at the first PNP meeting, and we could let people know, or not a lot of them, but like, I don't know, certain things we can make sure the new members are aware of that, because maybe if they're not interested in PNP consistently being like on the PNP, we could make sure that they maybe try to come to a few PNP meetings, like when these are on the agenda. Does that make sense?
I got slightly distracted there. Is the idea that we should do what at the first PNP?
To make sure that the new members are aware when these are covered. Like I would, the chair could send a specific email to just be like, hey, by the way, at this PNP, we're covering some stuff that maybe you wouldn't know because you're a new member. So if you don't frequently go to PNP meetings, you might want to come to this one, I think is what I meant.
Yeah.
And there's
yeah.
With that, there's also they're getting a glossary going. They're going to have the best information coming into it completely new. So they're going to have stuff that we won't be able to see as easily. So happening them early on that too would be awesome.
Yeah. And then, at the full meeting in January, given the election of officers, obviously, but my thought was, just because I was thinking about it, is the chair should still maybe not go through all meeting norms and processes, but kind of just give a quick, I think, statement just as to to reiterate to all members as well as new members that it is expected as much as possible that people should attend at least one subcommittee meeting every month. And just to kind of let them know, that is where the work gets done. And then also just kind of remind them that the flow of information. So often we see presentations or we discuss topics at our subcommittees, either I&E or PNP. We discuss them, we kind of get into the weeds, we really dig in, and then we put together a resolution either during the meeting or right after the meeting via email. And then that goes to the full meeting. And so then really the full meeting is a lot of reporting out on what happened at subcommittees. And then maybe infrequently, maybe 50% of the time, at a full meeting, we'll also get a presentation of something maybe kind of bigger or more important. Like, you know, like the transportation action plan would come to, you know, the full meeting, just so that they kind of understand like where the work gets done and how the flow kind of moves, so that they aren't confused, because at like the first meeting, we're literally going to be like, here are some reports on things you never saw, you know, so they kind of get why and how the meetings flow. I thought that might be a good thing for like maybe the chair to cover after all the things are discussed. So.
I'm in agreement with that. I'm not sure. There's some stuff that I have in mind for that should probably happen in the first full committee around onboarding. And then there's this sort of subset of what are the next few meetings of PNP, and I'm not sure what the best path to go down right now is, and if people are still responding to Matthew's document.
Julia, what I want to say is like, let's go, like right now is the time to cover what you just said. Okay. I think getting a sense of like, you know, I mean, and we're gonna like talk about this as well in the executive committee, but we should do it here because we have a full group. So yeah.
Before we move on from your document, I think we need a when to know document besides the need to know. And I guess that's the fourth bullet point, but I think something that sort of explains the 0-30, the different points where we hear things and the different levels that they are, but also like when different things happen in CLIC and in capital improvements.
Okay, I have that. I'm gonna reframe what happens in a typical year as when to know. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at there.
And I wanted to also include things like when we're recruiting people, when we want to start discussing it in the PNP, because that's so far not been systematized in the way that it seems like you're starting to get things systematized, that the more of us can share that information, the better.
I appreciate that feedback too.
So to move on to like this coming full board meeting, with the onboarding, my thinking right now is that it needs to be pretty different with a pandemic. And I don't tend to like the one-on-one buddy system for newcomers, just because if you have personality mismatches, there's kind of a pressure to go through one person as a gatekeeper almost, or it can feel that way, rather than setting sort of a core group of people who are saying, message me if you have questions and I'll get back to you. Like reach out if you want explanations. So I'm wondering if we can maybe figure out who has the interest and capacity in being a point of contact for new members. And if we can also, along with that, set up some, maybe for the first 3 months, rotate a different person of us through, or I guess it's just us because the full committee's next meeting, but any of us who can commit to like a half-hour phone call with a new member once a month and just talking to a different new member each month, so that they're getting, like, it doesn't have to be a full half hour, but just having a little bit of that contact that can go beyond the formality of what we do in the meeting, so that people feel like they can put personality to faces, to voices, all of that. That would be.
Can you summarize really concisely what you just said? So like what I heard and what I think makes a lot of sense is like you want to like set up a way for, I'm just going to call them legacy because I you know, existing old, you know, whatever. But so PAC members who have been on
legacy
for a while,
members
and the new members, you want to like get them together virtually.
And I want it to be people who sort of self-select, the legacy members who self-select and say, yeah, I am into this, I can do it. So that it isn't just like, it relieves pressure on the new members to do the outreach. We will be contacting them, and it will be people who are wanting to talk more about sidewalks or whatever, who are going to be the ones doing that contact and figuring it out.
I like this idea, and my thought for it would be maybe like maybe instead of certain introduction questions, you know, the icebreakers, part of that could be in the icebreaker, and then it could be like, I'm going to drop my email in the chat, so if you want to reach out to me about any of this stuff, reach out, you know, like I'm available. And so then you can opt into being available, and then also it's like covered in the introduction, so you actually like, maybe you jive with somebody, like you want to talk, somebody new wants to talk about drainage, and here's Julia talk about it, and is like, yes, and then they like take Julia's email, you know?
Yeah.
So I
That
think
sounds
that would be a
great.
great way to do it.
I want to make sure that like people are thinking through what it involves. And ideally, I really would love if we can do like that outreach. So it isn't just waiting for them to contact us and it isn't just one of us contacting one of them, but like they'll get 3, maybe they don't respond, but over the first 3 months, they'll get an email from a specific PAC member and a different one each month, something like that.
I think I like the idea, and I like that the impetus should be on the legacy members to make the contact. And I think maybe we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone by having, when the subcommittee agendas come out, that an executive committee member or a subcommittee co-chair reach out to discuss that agenda and what the meeting will likely consist of, just to import the importance, highlight the importance of attending a subcommittee meeting, kind of talk about, these are the kinds of things that we talk about on this subcommittee, and 3, gives them a perfect opportunity to ask any questions or just kind of segue into more like, do these kind of issues interest you, or like what, I mean, I think take advantage of the agenda for the subcommittees for the first 3 months, I think would be an opportunity.
That sounds awesome. The one thing that I would be slightly hesitant on is that it puts those communications on the co-chairs, and I'm happy to do that, and I have the time, but I want to be respectful of other people. I know, different people have different work schedules and availability. So if the other co-chairs of the different subcommittees, like, is it who's willing and able, would that work? Because I think I really like tying it in with that.
Right. I hear what you're saying regarding just the co-chairs, and I just think like, the executive committee will have 6 people on it. That's 2 phone calls during 3 months if everybody kind of dives in. And if somebody not on the executive committee wants to get involved, more the merrier. They can, but I think it'd be nice just to be able to tell them that, you'll get a heads up when the agenda comes out for each of the subcommittee meetings, because they're very important, like Abigail, you're talking about, really kind of importing that information to them, and then go from there and see how that goes. But I think that's a place to try it.
As a current co-chair, I'd be glad to do that. I'd be glad to talk to somebody about a particular thing that's coming up in an I&E meeting, an agenda topic, or how we go through it, or what it feels like, what we might be talking about. I think that'd be fine.
Just to double check.
I don't know, but just currently I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
Just to double check, does it make more sense to do it pre or post? Because what are you going to know what the agenda item's about?
Yeah, we have setting calls.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I'm not talking about getting too far detailed. I mean, the big opportunity to do before is to encourage their attendance. The second thing is to sort of orient them generally about the types of things, on the I&E, and then you can just kind of have a little more of a discussion, as opposed to afterwards kind of debriefing. I think beforehand.
Yeah, and it also, like, if you're not sure what to talk about, it gives a structure to have that conversation with a complete stranger over the phone. So.
Yeah, I actually appreciate those clarifications. Cool. Love it.
Being available after makes sense too, as something to offer, but hopefully people will feel more comfortable if they get a call first and then go to the meeting and are participating, that if they have follow-up questions, they might reach out at that point. Or that we can reiterate, like, that we're happy to do that.
Great.
Yeah.
I love the ideas that we've had so far.
I think those 2 things were the big ones for this next meeting, along with sort of a tiny, maybe tiny thing. I'm wondering if we're not doing a lot of intro space, and I've heard of different groups that are somewhat similar to ours being pretty successful in having, like, making up for that time beforehand where you're just kind of chatting at people and the little tiny social bits. So maybe doing short icebreaker things, at least in the subcommittees where we have fewer people and sometimes a bit more time. Maybe it's only PNP. I'm not sure where, but I'd like to try to create space for non-meeting items of some sort, just to keep those connections that were people outside of just our thoughts on walking and using wheelchairs.
Okay, so I'm taking that to be in like the subsequent meetings for PNP. Did I get that right?
I'm not sure where it best fits.
Okay.
Fits into other time, or if it's like 10 minutes before we hit record, so that it's like it feels less like you're, having your small talk recorded forever.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we could make it clear on agendas, like 4:20 come for discussion, and then could be like available maybe for the first few meetings or something. I mean, only if we can't fit it into a regular meeting agenda, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I think
having a first 10-minute icebreaker, I think that makes a lot of sense. And Jim Welsh posted in the comments, that's a good question, Millicent. Can we do that? Are we allowed to enter meetings 10 minutes early? I think it would be on the person hosting the meeting to let us in that early, I'm guessing, but that would be problematic maybe.
I will say this, you show up for meetings beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And you just chat. I mean, it's not the meeting doesn't start until it's started by the chair.
I think it would just be if someone at Public Works in their schedule is free to actually let people enter into the team.
Yeah,
So.
Totally. And Milson already does that now. I mean, like right, like it's like but it's kind of random and likely. Sorry to speak for you, Milson. Please feel free to jump in, but just so that it's ready, right? And so if we do that at 3:30 instead of 4, and we're not talking about business at all,
right?
Yeah.
I have to say that.
And then Jim Welsh put in the comments too the idea of maybe, I think at the first meeting, can we just make it clear in a bullet point for like January's meeting that there's like time for questions, and maybe at the end that we like schedule out like a good chunk of time for like new member questions. And then also he said like Q&A meetings, like maybe there's a Q&A at the end of each subcommittee in January as well, just for like, people like, have freedom to ask.
The nice thing about having the chat as well is that people could be putting their questions in real time in sort of a way that, I know we're not supposed to use it for comments, but I think we could use it in that way. No?
No, once you say it out loud, it becomes something we have to. No, we can't. Or not. We should not be using chat that way. The only thing we should really be using chat for is like, you're muted, or I have a question.
In some meetings, not this type that I've been in, but city-run meetings, they're muting everyone and then reading the questions out of chat. So I'm thinking that essentially.
Oh, like more like a open house presentation style thing.
Yeah, so that if new members have like those questions about like why did that just happen, that they could be recorded in there.
I think we can remind them that like in the chat, I think that might be part of meeting norms is like what the chat versus like out loud is for. And then it's also like if anybody ever asks a question in the chat, often like hopefully one of us will just read it out loud. Like, oh, somebody has a question in the chat, it says this, and then it becomes part of record. So
we're gonna have to. I mean, no. Well, we're not supposed to use chat that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize for using it that way. I forgot. So because and maybe some of you have it similar, but when we have meetings like this, the chat is a very active place for people to comment, put questions in real time, and it's acceptable to do that. So I'm very used to doing that all the time. Mm-hmm. And I forget that, during these meetings that it needs to be part of the public record. So again, my apologies for doing that, and I'll try not to do that anymore. But it's unfortunate because I think what I've found in the meetings that I attend at work, and my colleagues agree that being able to engage that way is really helpful and productive. So I think that's a challenge that we're going to have to try and navigate through. And I think we can. It's just unfortunate that we can't automatically make the chat a part of public record in a different way other than somebody, speaking or saying what is in the chat.
I think Millicent's reminding us about the accessibility, and I do think that's really important, given that having video access or being able to visually read the chat is not a given. So I appreciate that it might not work for us, but also that there's so many different norms popping up in different kinds of meetings like yours, Jim, that we do need to be really clear on this, especially since this is not so much what norms have developed out of our group, but literally like what is our legal responsibility.
And our city coordinator on the call today is not equivocating at all. It's like we aren't supposed to use chat that way. I think it's pretty flatly stated and repeatedly.
Sorry.
So then, what I think is really important then, and if we can't use chat, because one of the great things about chat is that it makes inclusivity more front and center for everybody, because a lot of times it's difficult to get a word in verbally, because obviously we have a number of people on the call. So what I would propose and ask you all for your feedback is do a round robin, and I think we've been doing that pretty well, but I think it's even more important to do a round robin because there are so many voices on the line, and it can be hard to chime in or get a word in, especially if you're an introvert. So just a thought.
The other thing, Jim, and this is really important, I think, and Millicent, I'll ask you to verbally tell me if this is true. Like we are supposed to have almost no substance in chat, but Jim, what you said is we can use the hand, thing to raise a hand, or you could put in chat like, I have a question, just to alert the chair. But so that's not substance, right? You could say like, hey, we have 15 minutes left, or, whatever. But it's the substance in the fact that like others that maybe just be on the phone can't see.
That's correct, Matthew. You have to be able to verbally say everything during these meetings so that people who are joining via the phone and other ways can hear what we're doing. So if you want to raise a question, you can say, can we talk about X subject? And then we'll discuss it out loud verbally.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like what Jim is bringing up seems really valuable to make sure that people with different styles feel comfortable, and maybe even asking people like, do you tend to, I'm ready to shoot my mouth off before people finish speaking half the time.
When did that happen?
Right? Not that I have anything of substance to say, but some people might prefer, like if we did a round robin, there might be people who want a bit more time, or maybe there's ways of if somebody could type in their comments and there's someone else who's willing to read the typed comments, as long as that doesn't go against what our guidelines are. If every word is read verbatim and somebody feels more comfortable typing out their thought.
I just want to clarify, and not to be a stickler on this, but it's not type into chat and then read it read it. It's just not put substance in chat.
Okay, so if somebody's not everyone is verbal to the same extent, and we don't have the same ability. I guess I don't want to get down that path. I think we're missing out.
My thought was maybe like I like Jim's idea of the round robin, and I think maybe it could come down to, and this I think doesn't even just go for new members. This could go for like just a really great way to run virtual meetings for a while is whoever's running the meeting makes it a point more often to, at the last 5 minutes of whatever comment period that we're on, whether it's, for like a specific presentation or at the end of a meeting, is to go around and actually like look at the list of people there and just say, hey, so-and-so, do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add? And just basically go down the list and give them a second to respond. when particularly PAC members, maybe not everybody. And I think I could see us making sure to do that at the January meeting, and then subsequent meetings, just like part of the person who runs the meetings now just has it on them to keep time, and then the last 5 minutes ask each person who hasn't spoken yet if they have anything to add. Does that feel like too much? But
I think it feels like too much, because if someone's too shy to jump into a conversation or try to get your attention, then they're probably going to freeze up when you say, okay, Millicent, do you have anything? If I'm going to say no, even if I did. Right. I mean, that's kind of embarrassing too.
Probably.
Maybe it doesn't have to be by name, and more just, just give an opportunity for folks to speak who haven't yet.
If maybe that's something we could ask. Oh, I see Peter's hand is up.
And I think that's a good thing to do. I think if the meeting runner makes a point of repeating encouraging the use of raising, or remind people they can raise their hand, that certainly suits me personally as an attendee. I would rather raise my hand, wait to be called on, than try and jump in white male-y at any perceived gap. Maybe that, raising the hand, encourage people to raise their hand, or remind people that is available to them. And then maybe if we inquire of the people on the phone, maybe who don't have that ability to make a point of inquiring of them if they have anything to add, that would be maybe don't do these. Not necessarily round robin to everybody on the Teams app, but at least there's nothing procedurally. Is there anything procedurally or accessibility untoward about the hand raising facility, Matthew, Millicent?
That is highly encouraged.
Yeah,
okay. I think that's yes. All right. So, may I? Since I raised my hand, I'm on our agenda topic at hand. The introductions, the welcoming slide that Matthew brought up early on was employed at my first meeting, and I really liked it. At that point, I felt inquired of, and I got to meet people. We went around into small groups, and that's not available to us here. But I thought I liked the format a lot. And we needed spring the questions. I think these are good questions. And like, what do we like? What do we like? Where do we like? What's our beef? What is our beef out there? And not everybody has my 90 tight seconds on seal coding always ready. So maybe we could ask the questions or let the new members know. Maybe let everybody know that we're going to ask those questions. Come up and maybe people can contemplate it, have an opportunity to contemplate a little before the meeting is. So if we're doing those kinds of whatever those questions may be, if we let people, they're gonna we're gonna ask people.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like we have a lot of room to be communicating. Like in the agenda, say here's the question, the icebreaker, and then also checking in with people about how it's working. Is the hand raising working for you or not? Or hopefully the survey might pick up some of that stuff as well. And I
was going to ask about the survey, Julie. Are we going to wait until January now and then offer it to the new members, or are we just going to try to get our current members?
Chris is on it. I don't know. As far as I know, I mean, it would be great to have the current members as well as new members. The current members are going to have more of how has it gone so far.
No, yeah, that's what I meant. Is I know current members were going to get it. I just wasn't sure if we were going to wait and let the new members go to a few meetings and then respond to the survey, or if we should send it out now and then take the feedback we get from current members and hopefully make every experience better for everyone, including new members.
I honestly don't remember or know when Chris is sharing it.
I think sooner than later, and I like the idea of using it sooner so we can make it better sooner. Jim?
Cool. Yeah, I was just going to ask what's the purpose of the survey? I'm not sure that I've heard about it.
We talked about it in August, and it was basically and then I've drafted something, and bunches of stuff come up. So we just got back to it, I think, in November. basically we aren't seeing every single PAC member attending meetings, and we are seeing even members we used to see at full committee. So it's such a different style to meet like this during the pandemic. We wanted to try and figure out from people what's shifted, if there's things that are working better, if there's things that are really rough, if there's things that they're seeing in other ways that groups are meeting that we could learn from, like capturing all of that, just because this is different and we want to not be having people feel unwelcome or uncomfortable or unable to participate. And there might be strengths of this that we could keep going even after we're able to be in person.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and I don't know that it would make any sense to have the newcomers participate, right?
I don't know that it would, but we could, I mean, just letting them know that this is the kind of thing that is still in process and that we are actively interested in continuing to work on, maybe would be helpful for them. That this isn't like some fixed, that's fixed in as much as there's things guiding us and we, but we're still trying to figure out what the best practices are within that.
Right.
Matthew?
Julia, I had another thing that I think we talked about recently around an idea that you had been floating around for a while about resolution guidance. Go for it. You want to share?
So that's one that Erin worked on as well. Well, there's kind of two things. Erin worked on a checklist that we had talked about right after the one-page presentation guide. And the idea with the checklist was specifically in I&E projects, we'd be able to look through things we know we always are looking for, like lane widths or reaction zones and how those impact lane widths, stuff that comes up over and over and over. And the second piece of this, if we had that going, we also were thinking a resolution guide. And this is something that Abigail and I have talked about around our climate resolution, but has come up in some other ways. Basically, if we can come up with kind of a Mad Libs or of resolutions that we can have standards for what's the language that we use when we're very put out, what are the things that we say when we're really disappointed in a project? How does it differ when we're disappointed and we think that this design is going to kill people? Like, what do we say when we recognize this is a constrained project, but it's really good despite it being sort of a bad reason for it? Or there's all sorts of support levels that we have. So how do we communicate those? How can we set up sort of, language and bullet points to go through it and make it easy for us to write without getting into that editing as a group, which is kind of not the most fun. And also make it easy for the people we're sending it to look through and go, okay, they still are kind of ticked off about this, but in this particular project, we're meeting these standards, we're not doing this. Like, get them all that information, whether it's the big picture resolutions that we've passed or the very particular in that project, what are the radii looking like and are we okay with it?
Julia, I heard you say easy, but I'm gonna change, or at least my word that I want to add is efficiency. I think what you're talking about could just make these like, so you just know, you know what your resolution is going to like encompass. And if it's awesome, it'll look like this. And if it's terrible, it'll look like this. And then there's
exactly
a shade in the middle. Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. And hopefully that also, if we know between the guide that the checklist that Erin was working on and this bigger resolution one, which will include points of that, that'll free up our thinking so that we're not relying on ourselves to be the only thing catching whether or not it had bump outs, and it could have bump outs, for example, because that's definitely, or one of the other issues that I've seen is when we've seen projects that are a huge improvement over what exists, but not actually up to our standards, but we get so, there's been at least one occasion where we got so kind of starry-eyed over at the major change that we didn't push as far as we needed to and normally would have. So this hopefully will help us be as thorough as possible in approaching things with all of our experiences and big picture, whatever systems thinking we have, while also getting all the details.
I'll just go again. I'm really excited about this conversation tied to the principles of negotiation conversation. I think the two are like really connected together because like figuring out where the true power is of the PAC. I think a lot of it lies in resolutions. And then like the conversations with project managers to get there. I just think those are so interrelated.
Yeah.
Matthew, yeah, I agree with that because, hearing this idea for a sort of a PAX motions style guide, a Funkenwagner style guide kind of for the PAC motions, I think it can be a very good idea. But I also think that maybe it will free us up to, I think we leave power on the table when we are too vague in our motions. All right. So if this sort of efficiency language guide can get some of the broad strokes, and then that will free us up more for being very focused on a project that can actually give advice that Public Works can go like, oh yeah, that I know what that means. So it's not too big picture. It's as focused as we can get it. I just think that's critical.
Yeah, because that gives us, hopefully at least gives us the time to hone in on that rather than having to do all these other pieces and being sort of rushed at those things that you're talking about, Christopher.
Yeah, I like it.
And it's like thinking like when is vague and or broad and like big picture what is needed, because that's sometimes the case, and then when is it like the most useful is going to be specific, like a dimension. Or like a strong position on, so.
And how does it vary 0%, 30%, etc.?
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know what our steps are for that one. I know it was super helpful to have Aaron go through and just get a checklist down. I know that I've heard like we have a lot of really good editors within this group who the discussions that people have on the word choices I really appreciate, but I don't know if people want to start thinking about that, or if anyone ends up with drafts if the spirit moves them. I'm happy.
I think we have this on the agenda and we work on it together.
Yeah.
And then essentially produce.
Right, but what I was trying to say is like somebody has sort of a stroke of genius and says, oh, I kind of envision it, that we could.
All right, with that, we have 2 minutes left on our meeting. So before we proceed to announcements, are there any other comments on the onboarding discussion? Looking at those raised hands, lady.
I think this looks really good, especially just for at least the January meeting. I feel that feels really solid to me. So thanks, Matthew, and everyone for putting in stuff like that. And then I think for the subsequent meetings, Matthew, I shared with you a like P&P agenda idea board kind of that we have going. So maybe if you wanted to stick some in there, then to make sure at like P&P agenda setting, that kind of is a reminder, like part of the conversation. And then I have one announcement for whenever we're ready.
I have one thing to ask, which I think is okay. I started a glossary on my birthday like 5 years ago. And if people have terms that they think of that were confusing to them, please send them to me, because this is just me working on it. So I think I don't know how all of that works, but and then we can have at least something to start with whenever we get around to that. I'll just keep a running list.
All right, thank you. I think that's Abigail with your announcement. Take it away.
Yes. So just so everyone remembers the park board, I'm putting it in the chat again. I know not fully accessible, but there's a link to the Minneapolis Park Board's master plan. And we didn't get to talk about it here. We saw this presented to us once, I think sometime last year when we were in person, but then there was never a resolution on it, and I'm not sure why. But because I don't know anyway, but you can share your thoughts about the draft plan for the 2021 comp plan for the Parks Department. So the link is in the chat if you feel like you wanted to look through that and then you had any comments you wanted to make. That's available for you. I think comments are only open through January, but if I'm wrong, then hopefully this would come in front of a meeting sometime soon. Anyway, I'm not sure, but there it is.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, the executive call tomorrow is at 3:30 on Teams. Is that correct? Okay, 3:30, not 3. Okay, thanks.
That is correct.
30. Mm-hmm.
3:30.
Okay, Neil stands up.
All right, I want everybody to read their names. I want to make sure I've got everybody on the list. Attendance-wise, I mean. Peter's here. Peter's in, Abigail's in, Julia Hoffer, Barb, Jim Welsh was here, Millicent, and Matthew. Who else?
Heather Gillick was as well.
Heather Gillick was in. Okay.
Paul St. Martin was here for a while.
Paul was in. All right, thank you.
Ratana was here.
Tana, but they all dropped off.
Steve Mahwald was here for a while.
Oh, he was.
Yeah. At the beginning. And then we had
There you are.
Nathan. We had Nathan and Hillary Holmes.
Oh, right. They started the discussion on the Upper Harbor. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Wonder why the hell I couldn't
Okay.
get.
Any other announcements before we adjourn?
All righty.
Thank you, one and all. We're adjourned.
Have a great one, everyone.
Hey,
Bye-bye,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Allison. Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.
Or not, as the case may be.
Or not, yeah, really.
So I have to wait for all of you guys to leave so I can turn it off since we're
Well, that's
recording.
right. I'll do you the favor.
Yeah, go ahead. Bye, Neil.
See ya. Oh my God. Unbelievable. These meetings kill me. Yeah.